It's Dr. Chellam with Save Your Thyroid, Restore Your Thyroid.
Transform Your Thyroid. We can't even remember.
remember.
We can't even remember our own book's name, but it's actually Transform Your Thyroid. That's really what we're going to start in the next few series. Really talk about thyroid disorders. I think there's enough information out in the web as well as on Dr. Google University about thyroid, but this is going to be our take on it. This is something that I'm very passionate about, mainly because I think of all the endocrine glands, the thyroid is probably the most ill understood by both physicians and patients alike. And what I want to give in this podcast, an overview of why a thyroid disorder is not as simple as what medicine should I be on? What can I take? And what combination, whether synthetic or natural. And I know when you talk to multiple functional medical providers or you talk to holistic doctors, everybody has their own take on we should do synthetic, we should do natural. I'm going to get down to the nitty-gritty details of what is the thyroid, why when it dysfunctions, we don't think about medications. We should actually really think about it as, let me put it this way. I think the thyroid gland, if you have a genetic susceptibility, I have to emphasize that if you have a genetic susceptibility, it's probably one of the weakest endocrine glands that you have in your body. So when the thyroid fails, you always need to ask not what should I take, but why? Why do I have a thyroid disorder? And that's what we're going to delve into in this podcast. So welcome, everyone. I'm Dr. Chellam from Holistic and Integrative Center of Novi, and this is Marina, a nutrition coach. Our goal is to look at people's blueprint, figure out what do they need in order to get healthy or what is making them unhealthy and create your specific plan, what you should be doing and what needs to shift in your whether it be your metabolic design or your environment so that you actually can attain the most optimal health for your age and your situation. So the Transform Your Thyroid is the book that's going to be coming out in a couple of weeks. And
actually next week, 2 weeks, October 2nd.
Oh, yeah, 2 weeks.
Well, so I hope it's done.
Yeah, it is done.
October
it's just,
2nd.
I think a couple of our clients actually volunteered to read it and see if it is actually making sense and it's simple. And I'm going to try, that's our goal, is to make it very simple and easy for people to read and understand. But let's look at what the thyroid is. Thyroid, the word thyroid is derived from, of course, we have to use Greek, right? We always ask, are you speaking to me Greek? But this is Greek. It's thyrios. Thyrios means shield. And they feel it was designed to protect us. And I consider the thyroid almost like if you look at the army, the infantry, they are the first line of defense. So they actually take a lot of the impact of a failing health is really seen in your thyroid gland, particularly if you have a genetic trait for it. So your family history is very important. But one of the reasons I say don't talk about medicines till you know why your thyroid failed is because we have really 4 different categories, I would say, as to why the thyroid fails. Let me pull that up for you so I don't forget to tell you something. But the 4 different categories are, how do I remove this separately?
Oh, you want this out?
Yeah, just the drawing.
Oh, you can't do that. Oh, there it goes.
Okay, so the 4 different categories we look at is when your thyroid fails, you want to look at, is it your thyroid that's failing or something else making it fail? These are the only 2 ways to look at it. When I say thyroid failing, it means directly the thyroid is not producing its hormones. That would be when it's directly damaged. So you have radiation. How would you get radiation to your neck if you've had, like I've had people with keloid scars? And that's another way that they do radiation to the neck. Or because for another reason you had a throat cancer at some time or a lymphoma somewhere where they had to use radiation. your thyroid becomes very susceptible to damage. And then if you were in any of these areas like Chernobyl, where you had the nuclear reactor accident, as well as Hiroshima, Japan. Those cases also, the thyroid cancers were very common, thyroid disorders were very common. So that's a direct insult to the thyroid. The other is very common, but we don't really look for it, is viral infections. Thyroiditis means an inflammation of the thyroid. It can come from viral infections, or it can come just after pregnancy. So if you have a susceptibility to thyroid disorders, with every pregnancy, your thyroid begins to get inflamed. So in fact, most women will be able to recall that all of their health problems began soon after pregnancy. Now, let me tell you, it's not the pregnancy that's causing the problem. It's your state of health before you became pregnant that makes you most susceptible. So let me explain that further. I usually find in life what we do, our 20s, we spend a lot of our 20s just enjoying life, right? Drinking, eating whatever you want. Your metabolic rate is so awesome that no matter what you eat, you will lose weight. That's what happens to most women in their 20s. So by the time they settle, have a baby, they've pretty much damaged their gut and a lot of their metabolic processes, except that it's not very obvious till that huge physiological stressor occurs, which is your pregnancy. And soon after that, you find there's a lot of inflammation of the thyroid. So what happens is soon after pregnancy, your hair begins to fall. You may have like that apathy or the postpartum depression. You may feel bloated. You may feel like you're not losing weight. Then after 6 months, everything gets a little better. You'll find a lot of back pain too. And we don't think of these things as a part of the thyroid, but as your thyroid gets better, you get back to your normal, and maybe 2 or 3, somewhere between 3 and 5 pounds always remains. And then after about a year, you may lose it, but if you get pregnant the next year, then you're again getting that bout of thyroiditis. So by the time you're on the 3rd and the 4th pregnancy, you've pretty much damaged your thyroid. And that's how a lot of people find that after pregnancy, they cannot lose their weight. They've been feeling tired. They have dry hair. They cannot sleep. So we actually look for that history of, is there something that triggered off these symptoms? The other one is there was some kind of injury to the thyroid. You had bleeding and destruction. You had some other neck surgery. Could something have been affected in the thyroid? This was very rare. And sometimes we also look for damage to the pituitary gland, which is the master gland in the brain that can destroy the production of thyroid hormones, because the thyroid stimulating hormone no longer stimulates the production of the thyroid. Now, if those of you who have no idea what the thyroid is, I probably should make a separate podcast for you, but actually the brain stimulates the thyroid to make the thyroid hormones. The thyroid stimulating hormone, or TSH, is the basic screening test that we do in traditional or conventional medicine to make sure that axis and the hormone is probably working normally. And a lot of times it does not give you the full story. It just tells you that the pituitary is producing just enough hormone, and if it's within a certain range, we say you're normal. But we have to delve a little deeper, and we'll get into that at probably another test. But let me tell you what are the things you need to look for when you have these symptoms of low thyroid.
So, yeah, what are the symptoms of low thyroid? I think that would be helpful too.
We can go into that. So a lot of it is, let's say you've been always a certain weight, and suddenly in the last year, you've just gained 20 pounds. How many times we hear that? I didn't change anything. I've always been eating crappy, or I've never exercised, but now I've suddenly gained weight.
Yep.
That's a mark that your thyroid is not working. A lot of times that's usually what we see. So the sudden weight gain for which you have no different explanation, it's not like you changed your eating habits. If you've been eating unhealthy, it's always been the same. The other one is you begin to feel cold. You're constantly cold. Everybody else is in tank tops and camisoles, and you're wearing a cardigan and a sweater. That's probably a sign that your metabolic rate is so low that you're feeling there's not enough heat being produced. Sometimes people who are very astute enough, they will check their temperature to see if they actually feel cold, and you'll find your body temperature, so basal body temperature is much lower. It may be between 96, high 96 and 97.
And there's a lot of people that say, oh, I normally run low, and that's not normal.
Yeah.
So
That is-
98.6 is normal.
Yeah, yeah, and a lot of people do run low all the time, and but that also tells me your basal metabolic rate is affected. The other symptom, it may or may not happen with everyone, is hair loss. But the most common symptom, almost 65% of people with low thyroid complain of, is fatigue.
Yep.
I am tired. You're never tired if you are normal. You're tired if something is going on. And I will, let me explain that even better. Can you never be tired normally? Well, you can be tired, but you know that kind of tiredness. You know you've actually put in hours of work, or you've been working unusually long, unusually hard, so you're exhausted. But this fatigue is something that's, you're waking up fatigued. By the middle of the day, by 11 a.m., you're fatigued. And you know that you're just it's taking everything in you to finish the day's work.
Without taking a nap, yeah.
Yes, and all you can think of is get home and take rest. Put your feet up and just doze off. That is an unusual form of fatigue that unfortunately is very common to thyroid. Then, of course, the dry hair, falling of hair, eyebrows become thin. So the best way, I'll tell you guys, take a picture of yours, probably 5 years younger, but when you thought you were perfectly healthy, and take a picture of yours now when if you have all these symptoms. You will see immediately the change in your face. There'll be a lot of puffiness around your eyes. There'll be you'll have the lines around your nose a little deeper. Your jaw actually sags. You can see that extra skin that'll sag. You can see that you have what do they call this, double chin?
Yep.
A triple. It just hangs. And it's almost like the whole face is falling towards gravity or responding to gravity, whereas in the past it was all lifted up. So that's something very common with thyroid, and this is because there's a protein, when you have low thyroid, there's a protein that accumulates in the layer of the skin. There's a dermis and epidermis. Epidermis is the top one, then the dermis, and this protein accumulates. It actually gives you that aged look.
So it's not just normal aging. This is beyond that.
Yeah, and it'll be within a few years, and you tend to look older, and you'll find that because now you gain this 20 pounds, you're going to, obviously, what do most women do? They join Weight Watchers, they start exercising, they find a trainer, they go to the gym, and you cannot lose even an ounce of weight. That's your metabolic rate is completely dead. These are the symptoms you want to look for when you're saying, what do I think my thyroid is not working? And why would it not be very simple to just do a test? But if you go to a conventional doctor, even if you ask for detailed testing, at the most they will do TSH, T3, T4. It still doesn't tell you the whole story. So a lot of people come to us saying, my thyroid tests have always been normal, but it is not normal if only those 3 tests are done. The second thing is, I have also people who will come and tell us, I'll have my doctor do the test. You can have any doctor do any of these tests. In fact, you can go and get them done yourself. But if you don't know how to interpret this and actually connect it to the story, those tests are useless. And I can tell you about 8 years ago, before I knew what functional medicine is, I would have seen those tests and I wouldn't have known the significance. As long as the TSH and T4 was within the normal range, I would have said you're normal.
That's what a lot of doctors base their prescriptions on too. So we have a lot of people, women mostly, who come in, they are on thyroid medicine and it's done nothing for them.
Right.
And their doctor says, well, it's normal, your levels are normal now, but they still feel like they're not normal.
And the problem with that also is, and I just want to make sure, guys, everybody, can you hear us? Because we are using a different mic today. Hopefully.
We always have some issues whenever we try something new. So let us know. But it looks like everyone People usually tell us this.
Yeah, they usually were said by now.
Yeah.
So one of the things to keep in mind when you say, I'm going to have my doctor do the test, it's not about just doing the test. You need somebody who can actually interpret this test accurately for you. So it makes it significant in your care that this test is actually normal. So if you have those symptoms and your tests come back normal, the symptoms are more important than the test. And what I have learned in my practice is your test actually lag behind your symptoms. Your symptoms come first, then the test becomes abnormal. And similarly, when you feel better, your test lag behind how you feel. So as you get better, I like to, as long as people are on the path of healing, I like to do the test much, much later than when they kind of stabilize, rather than do it soon after they've made all the changes that they're supposed to. So one was the direct destruction of the thyroid gland through whatever external reasons. Then the second one is the most common, almost I would say a majority, 80% and above of the thyroid disorders we see today are autoimmune. Auto means self, and immune is your immune system. So your immune system, what I call it, is the friendly fire. In other words, it is fighting something else, and for some reason mistakes the thyroid as the enemy and tends to attack the thyroid instead. And there are several reasons for this to happen. A lot of times we think there's a viral infection that exposed certain parts of the thyroid and made it more susceptible for the immune system to come and attack it. It could be a gut problem where suddenly certain foods that you were never sensitive to before, you've started getting sensitive to. And then the thyroid hormones, there are several theories about it. They think the thyroid hormone looks like gluten, therefore gluten sensitivity can lead to thyroid destruction. So usually it's a viral infection or some medication that you took. For example, as amiodarone was a medication in the past was used for abnormal heart rhythms. We had to check thyroid because it did cause thyroid dysfunction. It affects the metabolism of the thyroid. And then you can have, obviously, the food sensitivities, and but commonly it's viral infection and, of course, the pregnancy. The viral infection that we are noticing more and more commonly is Epstein-Barr virus, which everybody gets, I think, is at some point exposed to. And we do a specific test to see if you have active EBV infection. If you have the active EBV infection, then we need to create a treatment protocol to get rid of that infection so your immune system is not so hyper and destroying your own thyroid. So that, again, requires somebody who's very familiar with that aspect of the autoimmune process to help you deal with it. Then, of course, the other common reason where you have thyroid disorders is because you don't have all the raw materials needed for the thyroid hormones to be made. Do you have enough iodide from your food, or zinc, or iron? I've mentioned this before. Iron is a huge one because a lot of young women, they have heavy menstrual cycles because they have high estrogen states because of insulin resistance, because of the food that they eat. So when they have a high insulin state and they have a high estrogen state, they have menstrual abnormality, they bleed heavily, they lose iron. Iron is a very important part in the metabolism of the thyroid hormones. And if you are anemic, don't take iron, you're most likely going to have symptoms of hypothyroidism. And then there are certain ethnic groups, the Indian, South Indians particularly, and also the Middle East. They tend to have a lot of inhibition of the incorporation of the iodide into the thyroid gland. And the foods that we eat, especially the cruciferous vegetables, can also do inhibit this. But I want to just make a statement there. Cruciferous vegetables are very, very healthy. They just have to be cooked. You just don't have raw cabbage and raw cauliflower and broccoli. And of course, vitamin A and vitamin B deficiencies, which I don't think anybody checks for vitamin A deficiencies in patients who come with thyroid. And
or
we
any of
find
those other things.
any of these, that's
Yeah.
true, no zinc, no iron. So those are the things we look for. And then a new category, that is, we have almost a 300% increase in thyroid disorders. And I think in 2016, the Endocrinology Society did admit that we do have what we called hormone disruptors or endocrine disruptors, which is the chemicals that we are exposed to. So you have the BPA, everybody understands that. And then we have the chloride, bromide products, perchlorates. These are all present in inflammables, in cosmetics, in plastics, obviously, in pesticides. And so a lot of our hormones get disrupted, and unless you know your level of exposure to these, you probably are disrupting your thyroid. And what they actually do is not prevent the production. Actually, I would say they somewhat interrupt with the formation of the thyroid hormones. So, and nobody ever checks for that or detoxes people for that and gives them an education on what they should be doing.
So we'd all be lobbying against all of these products.
That's right. And I think that is the truth. So what I want you to also understand, why is it more common in women? For some reason, our estrogen levels, estrogen state, our high estrogen state puts us at a higher risk for autoimmune disorders and a lot of what we experience. And this is nothing against male doctors, but I can tell you when they make an effort to be healthy, men in general, they get healthy very fast. And we've seen that in our practice. We have husband and wife join. The husband just drops pounds and the wife is the one cooking the meals for both of them, and she can barely get to move 1 or 2 pounds. Because our hormones somehow put us at a disadvantage, though it puts us at an advantage in many other ways, it puts us at a disadvantage when it comes to autoimmune disorders and all these disruptors. Sorry, Instagram, if we just shook, it's because our camera just fell. All right. So again, to summarize the 4 major categories as to why you have endocrine problems, either your thyroid failed, where you'll have a low T4, which is the inactive form of the hormone, or you have an autoimmune disorder where you can find all of those antibodies against your thyroid, or you have vitamin and mineral deficiencies. And the last one is something is disrupting your hormone. Usually it is chemicals that we have been exposed to, and we're exposed to almost 80,000 chemicals on a daily basis. And then each time, I guess every year, more and more chemical exposure, we find something new, something that makes our life convenient, but actually it's disrupting our hormones.
Yeah. Well, that's what's interesting too, is you said there's a 300% increase in thyroid issues, but there's also that huge increase in autoimmune, in autism, in asthma. These things are all connected. So it just kind of depends on how that person is going to be affected specifically, but it's really all coming from the same source, essentially.
And I think that's important to understand too, because what is your genetic predisposition? That's why your family history becomes very important. If a thyroid disorder is run in your family, most likely you're going to have a thyroid disorder.
That's going to be your weakest link.
Yeah, that's your weakest link. And if you have rheumatoid arthritis, then your autoimmune condition is going to be your rheumatoid arthritis. But remember, our target, so when you have an autoimmune thyroid condition, just giving thyroid medicines never is the answer. We actually have to look at what is the immune system disrupted by. And it could be the viral infection, it could be some kind of chemical, or it could be some kind of food sensitivity. So you really take the whole person into account and not just focus on the thyroid. It does not matter whether you have natural thyroid, whether you have compounded, or whether you have synthetic. In fact, I personally love the synthetic, but I use a lot of the natural NP and desiccated thyroid, which is from the pig glands. And I know there are a lot of advocates for the natural thyroid. It's because the natural thyroid has both T4 and T3. And remember, the T3 is the hormone that's not produced. It's produced at a lesser amount by the thyroid, but gets activated outside of the thyroid. And I think that's why people like desiccated, but you can get the synthetic. And the only reason I like the synthetic, if you get a good quality one, or if you want to get it compounded, is you get a specific dose. If I say 50 micrograms, I know you're getting 50 micrograms.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Whereas in the desiccated, when I say take 60, you may be getting 60, you may be getting a little more, you may be getting a little less. So again, it's not the kind of thyroid medicine. The solution is not the thyroid medicine. The thyroid, for the symptoms, it may be the thyroid medicine. But the solution to the problem is figuring out why is the immune system disrupted. Does your thyroid have everything it needs to make the thyroid medication, thyroid hormones, or do you have actually a functioning thyroid? If you don't have a functioning thyroid, you have to take thyroid medications. So hopefully that gives you a good overview of why you have thyroid disorders. If there are any questions, I'll be happy to take them. Let me refresh the screen to see if there are any specific questions.
And just to summarize, too, one of the big things is we're talking so much about autoimmune here, and I don't think autoimmune is almost ever addressed really in conventional medicine when you have Hashimoto's.
They do address it. They tell you have Hashimoto's, number one.
But the amount of people that call and don't understand what that means.
Yeah, they just said, they say, yeah, I know. They just say, oh, you have Hashimoto's. It sounds very fancy, and it sounds like, okay, I have Hashimoto's, now what? Mm-hmm. They say, well, your thyroid is still working, so we'll just continue to check it, and when it fails, we'll replace the medication. The problem is whatever is destroying your thyroid, it is just a signal that it's a flag that there's an underlying problem. So now you may lose your thyroid and you may be just on a thyroid medicine, but 6 years later you'll be a diabetic. And then you will say, oh, I'm a diabetic, it runs in my family. And then 6 years later you will have arthritis. And I'll say, oh, my mother had arthritis. And then another 10 years later you will have failing memory. What you fail to realize is the very first in your 30s, when your Hashimoto's or the antibodies were high, that was your warning sign. Your body said, I need some help. Instead, what we did is we just gave it medication with every symptom it created. Mm-hmm. And so before you know, by the time you're in your late 50s and early 60s, you're on 6 and 7 medications. All your friends are on the same medicine. So you think it's normal. And the medical system teaches us it's normal. It's inevitable. Once you have this is how it's going to happen. And I want you to understand, it is not inevitable. Having thyroid disease is not inevitable. It is just simply a flag that something needs to change, something needs to be addressed. And it is a journey, guys. It's not like you go see, I saw this holistic doctor and they gave me natural thyroid, now I feel great. You will feel great initially. Anytime you change the medicines, you're going to feel great. And eventually you'll find 6 months later those medicines don't work because the underlying problem is not your thyroid, but your immune system. Am I making that clear? I don't see any questions as yet, but I see that people are watching.
Maybe we just confused everybody. I'm not sure which one it is.
So when I don't get any questions, either everybody's confused or I'm so crystal clear that no one has any questions. It's like, you make sense. I hope that's what it is. And hi Jane, thank you for being here, and Patricia and Bonnie. Hi Bonnie. So let's see if there's if there are no other questions. Let's see what else you would like to know about. I just wanted to talk about the causes of thyroid, and I'm putting it in 4 broad categories. And when the book comes out in 2 weeks, it'll have a little more in detail on how each one of those impact your thyroid health. So do you have a nutrition tip for them today?
Yeah, I do have a couple little tips. Well, the big thing though to mention in terms of nutrition too is when you're talking about autoimmune disease, mm-hmm. It's really important. We always go back to this with your gut health because that is kind of really the entry point of autoimmune for most people. Mm-hmm. So getting out, the junk food, the processed sugar, all those kinds of, white carb type things that have a lot of chemicals.
Food-like products.
Yeah, when you want to put quotations around food, then you should not eat it.
No, actually, we had a client who just came today, and you asked me. So she had, was it a pasta?
It was a black bean pasta, organic.
Non-GMO.
Mm-hmm.
And it said ingredients, black beans, and right under it said contains soy. And we were trying to figure out where was the soy in it.
So I think she's actually going to call and find out. So I'm interested to see.
Yeah.
What her answer is.
Learning to read labels, understanding the less a food looks like its origin. So when you're buying quinoa pasta, quinoa doesn't look like anything like a penne pasta or angel hair or any of those. That's a processed food. I don't care if the ingredients are just one. It may say only quinoa, but how do they process it to make it look like a pasta and cook like a pasta? That's where I think I have a little bit of a problem with all of these health foods because they are highly processed. So the more whole your foods are, so apple is whole. Applesauce is processed. Apple pie is even further processed, right? But the apple is a whole food. And I just want you to look at it, how further away from the origin is it? And the further it is, the more processed it is.
So my question for you, because I was maybe going to mention this, but how do you feel about algae noodles, right?
Oh, the one that's a process. Mm-hmm. If you really look at it, it has sodium alginate, and it is processed because it's seaweed. How do you get it from seaweed? I don't know the processing. In fact, I think
it's crystal and it's white.
Yes, and it's hard to cook.
You don't have to cook it.
I know you don't have to, but if you want to cook it and make it a little softer, you can cook it all you want and it stays crystal and clear. So again, I think anything that is not in its natural form is somewhat processed.
So some of the deficiencies that can come up with thyroid, like you had said, iron is one of them. Yes. Good source of iron is your leafy greens. If you're steaming them, it's a good way to get some iron in, especially spinach. Selenium is a big one for thyroid. All you need is 3 to 4 Brazil nuts a day if you have a selenium deficiency that's affecting your thyroid. Vitamin A and B, really you can get that. As long as you're eating a wide variety of fruits and vegetables, you're getting all of that. And not B12, FYI, but your other B vitamins and your vitamin A are good.
The carotenoids, a lot of the colored vegetables have a lot of vitamin A. And then iodine. Seaweed. Yeah.
Whole seaweed.
That's why a lot of times I don't think we have as many issues in Japan. I think iodine, if you have a lot of cystic breast issues, fibroid uterus, ovarian cysts, iodine is a very good supplement to have. But I am a big fan of test, don't guess. Always test before you replace supplements. Because sometimes iodine has been connected with Hashimoto's. So if you take iodine indiscriminately without actually checking your levels and do too much of it, in fact, there's been a direct correlation of iodine salt and incidence of Hashimoto's. So we are iodine abundant. But Michigan particularly has a selenium deficient soil and an iodine deficient soil. So goiters are very common. That's a swelling of the thyroid gland. It's usually a deficiency. Majority of the nodules, 96% of the nodules are benign. So please think hard, ask a lot of questions. If anybody recommends thyroid removal, I see so many young women just lose their thyroid. Even though it's a weak gland, it's a very powerful gland. I don't know how to put it that way, but it's basically a powerful weak gland. It has the impact it has on your metabolic rate. I call it your beauty hormone. If you don't have a thyroid, your beauty is gone because your skin gets dry, you get more wrinkles, you get more of those hanging skin, you lose your hair, you lose your eyebrows, and you lose what is called the twinkle in your eye. Most people, if you look at children, they have the sparkle in their eyes. And when you lose your thyroid, you actually lose the twinkle. I'll also put in here a little spin on the Eastern aspect of approach to thyroid, which is in yoga. When you look at Ayurveda, the thyroid is in the 5th. It's called the chakra, so the focus of energy on your spine. It's right in the 5th, so the throat area. And they find people who are very suppressed, do not voice their opinion, who are not very authentic, who gossip. These are the people who have disruption of the thyroid.
That's all of us, right?
That's a lot of us. Yeah, that's a lot of us. We're constantly in the negative. So remember, it's extremely important to be very positive and really negative thoughts when they come, try to rephrase them. It will help your thyroid work much better. But in general, if you want to look at it from a conventional medical standpoint, you want to make sure nothing is attacking your thyroid, nothing is disrupting the formation of the hormone in terms of deficiencies or an abundance of other chemicals. I think that's pretty much gives you an overview of what are the reasons your thyroid fails. And above all, I should say you would have a genetic trait, and that's why you have a problem with the thyroid.
But that can be addressed successfully.
Genetics is just information. It doesn't get translated unless your environment is probably conducive to making it very obvious.
Mm-hmm.
So once again, thank you very much, guys, for joining us. I have a feeling we're not seeing the questions for some reason. You remember when we log off, we see the questions. So if we do see those questions, guys, we will answer them. Follow us on iTunes if you want to listen to the podcast again. You can also subscribe to our YouTube channel. Make sure you are in the Holistic Icon community if you haven't signed up already. And of course, our website is holisticicon.com. And this is Dr. Chellam and Marina from Holistic and Integrative Center of Novi, the best place for you to find your best doctor. And that will always be you.
And then next week, we'll be joined by our friends from Two Hounds Farm, and we'll be talking about all sorts of good stuff, pretty much about how local food really affects you as a whole. And that's always a fun conversation. So we do have one question. Do we have time?
We can quickly wrap up. It's Jane. She does thyroid malfunctions affect sleep? How, or is it usually other things? Absolutely. 100% thyroid is known to affect sleep. If it's low, you sleep all day long and you're still tired when you wake up. If it's high, you never get to sleep. So it can be both ways. It does disrupt. It's a very convoluted way. Remember, if it is your fire, if it's the fire of the cells, everything, and I think I've said that in my previous videos, if your thyroid does not work, you lose 40% of the function of the body. If it works too much, your metabolic rate almost doubles. It's almost 60% to 60 to 80%. So it does disrupt every process in your body. Head to toe, you can be affected by a thyroid disorder. I hope that answers your question, and thank you for the question. So, all right, this time we're really gone. So bye-bye, and we will continue to answer the questions. Thank you, guys.
All right, bye-bye.